I would like to turn things over to my colleague, Anthony Brisson. Anthony, again, is joining us from the Center of Racial and Social Justice, and we are happy to have him here with you. Anthony, I turn things over to you and welcome you this evening.
Thank you so much, Jessica, my esteemed colleague from our ESP Quality Department, as well as Dorothy View. I do miss being in that department with you all, and we continue to do great things together now in my position in our Human and Civil Rights Department. As Jessica said, my name is Anthony Brisson. I'm a Senior Program and Policy Analyst Specialist from the Human and Civil Rights Department, housed in the Center for Racial and Social Justice. The Center for Racial and Social Justice continues the association's proud legacy of advancing social justice advocacy with a particular focus on racial justice in education. The Center for Social Justice focuses on engaging our members, leadership, and community partners on a variety of social justice advocacy issues, including rooting out systemic racism in our society and institutions, and upholding LGBTQ rights, dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline, defending voting rights, promoting environmental justice, and advancing culturally relevant education for all students to ensure that students from all backgrounds and all races and all genders are equipped with the opportunities and resources they need to learn. And with that said, that is the reason why we are here tonight to discuss using pronouns to support a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment, particularly including our ESP members, who are an important and vital component to our school-based teams all across the country. I'm honored and privileged to be here with the ESP members, who are also representatives and members of our NEA SOGI committee, which stands for our Sexual Orientation, Gender, and Identity Committee. And all of the ESP on this call have and are currently members of the SOGI committee, and were appointed by the president of the association, Becky Pringle. I have also the honor to introduce our moderator for the conversation, Bill Farmer, who will be leading tonight's discussion. But before we get into that, there are a few other housekeeping items that we must get through. NEA has adopted a standard of conduct policy to ensure that all of our gatherings are welcoming to all and free from discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior. Discrimination or harassment based on race, color, ethnicity, religion, sex, age, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity, or expression, yes, we got them all, or any other characteristic protected by law will not be tolerated. If you experience any discriminatory or harassing behavior and want to report this incident, please contact our colleague, Christine Sampson-Clark. And with that said, as a participant in this webinar, as well as being an attendee, when you're participating in this webinar, you represent that you are an NEA member or supporter. You understand that this meeting may be recorded, which it is, and that NEA will own any recording of the meeting, and that no one else may record this meeting. And I emphasize that because I know there were questions in the chat that any outside recordings of this are not allowed. You further understand and agree that NEA may end the participation of anyone in this meeting who disrupts the meeting or undermines its purpose. And with that said, again, my name is Anthony Brisson. My pronouns are he, him, his. I would like to introduce to you our moderator of tonight's conversation with our fabulous ESP from all across the country, is an educator out of Illinois who serves as the chair of our SOGI committee, Mr. Bill Farmer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be here to serve as the moderator. My name is Bill Farmer. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a biology and chemistry teacher in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And it's a great privilege to work alongside these ESPs that are going to be our panelists and experts for the work that we're doing. So I'm going to turn it over to them actually to introduce themselves. And then we had some initial questions to kind of start off the conversation before we get to some of the questions that come from you. So I'll turn it over to Bobby to introduce himself, and then the whole panel will introduce themselves to you, and we'll get started.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bobby Travers from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I serve as a library paraeducator, and looking forward to tonight's discussion, and happy Pride, everyone.
Go ahead, Karen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Barnes-Ulrich. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a transportation school bus dispatcher from Austin, Texas.
Matthew?
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Powell. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a custodial supervisor and special events bus driver from Kentucky, and also the statewide ESP president for Kentucky.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sal Ramos. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a paraeducator / brailleist from Worcester, Massachusetts. Welcome.
All right, so these four fine individuals are going to impart some of their experiences and wisdom around the use of pronouns. So we'll start off with the initial question. You know, we work in a variety of educational settings in classrooms, cafeterias, transportation spaces, where pronouns are being more commonly used. And so in your different roles as an ESP member, why is it important that ESPs also implement the use of pronouns at all grade levels in the positions that they're working in? And so I'll have Matthew be the first one to provide a response for that question.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Bill. As ESPs, we can take the lead in making sure that all of our students feel welcome and affirmed in our schools, regardless of their gender identity. One way is to be thoughtful about how we use our pronouns. This is a meaningful way that we can support students whose gender might be different than what appears on their birth certificate. As ESPs, we play a critical role in this work because our students often feel safer coming to ESPs rather than their teachers in the classroom. Asking students of all ages what their name and pronouns are or what they would like to be called is a great first step that ESPs can implement. This will promote a more inclusive and supported environment for our LGBTQ students in our schools. It's imperative that ESPs across all grade levels creates an environment that nurtures everyone and is accepting of everyone. No student should ever feel excluded, especially some of our society's most vulnerable youth. Even if students are not accepted at home, oftentimes our schools are their only place of hope for a welcoming and safe place. When you look at elementary school students, many think that they are too young for conversations about pronouns, especially if they don't think that there are any transgender or gender nonconforming students in their school. However, by asking students their pronouns at a young age, ESPs can make room for students who may be exploring their gender identity and show everyone that gender identity should not just be assumed. So that's just one way that we can work towards using pronouns in our as ESPs.
Thank you, Matthew. Saul, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I was going to say, I think, actually, I know as ESPs, we have a very unique role in the lives of our students. As we know, we're the first and last educators that our students see every single day. So we actually have a great opportunity, not just to speak with the parents, but also speak with the students, or even sometimes overhear conversations, right? Like as students are getting in on crossing the street, the crossing guard may hear something, or may even have a direct connection with one of our students. Just like our transportation members, our bus drivers and monitors, our students are getting in, again, they can have conversation with parents, they can have conversations with students, or again, just overhear conversations. And it's great because not only do we get to see our students first, but also we can create that kind of like that communication pipeline between all of us, right? So if the crossing guard hears something, they can bring it directly to, let's say, the secretary of the school or one of the paraeducators who's greeting the students or watching the students first thing in the morning. So it's a line of communication where we can begin to know what our students are asking for, what the families are asking for. It also just opens up more conversation because someone, may not know how to deal with it. And that way we can seek further, information or try and figure out what's the best process to be able to go on with it. So again, it's very unique. And I think, it's a great opportunity for us, especially, some of us, for example, paraeducators who work directly in the classroom, being not at the front of the classroom, we are able to navigate between the students and have further conversations or work one-on-one or in small groups with students. And a lot of times our students open up more to us about what they're going through, what their feelings are. And then also just as ESPs, again, as the first educators that our students see in the morning, regardless of how bad things may be at home, how bad things may be on the way to school, by using their correct pronouns, by, you know, speaking to them, or it'll change their day. You could be actually the difference of how the student's day proceeds.
Thank you for that, Saul. And Karen, would you like to add from your experience in Texas?
I know that like the city that I come from, the district I come from, the pronouns are used and all, but my daughters go to a city outside of Austin, and the pronouns aren't being used properly, and there's constant conflict with some of the teachers and the aides and stuff in the classrooms. And my daughter is one that speaks up for one of her friends, and it's just something that needs to be taught across the nation, across all of ours.
Thank you. Yeah, and definitely like hearing your responses and reflecting how the young people that we're serving are starting to use pronouns should be an indication that as the adults in the space supporting these students, this also has to become part of the norm for us as well. So thank you for those perspectives on that. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about is like how to utilize this in spaces. And so the next question I'd like to kind of pose to the panel is to think about your own experiences with successfully using pronouns with your students and your colleagues. And so we'll hand that over to Bobby to kick us off to share just how you've been able to use that with your students and colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So I work in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a very progressive city, and we started recently with our school administration to look at all the collective bargaining agreements, and we made all the collective bargaining agreements gender neutral. So that's a step in the right direction. It took a while, but we accomplished 10 different bargaining agreements, and they're all gender neutral now. And also, I just want to say that NEA has great resources at nea.org/GLBTQ resources, and you should check that out also.
Thank you for that, Bobby. Matthew, what is your experience been like with how you've used pronouns with your students and colleagues?
Certainly. As a custodial supervisor, I've often went around, and when we have door tags that our state association gives to all members. So it says, "I love my public school," and then it has a place for you to put your name. So as ESPs, I also insert my pronouns as a model for students to see that. And I actually started it in my school building, and before you know it, the cafeteria ladies, they went out and they put their pronouns under their name tags out in the hallway. So, you know, it's especially at an elementary school setting, it might be hard. But just, you know, it takes small steps. And unfortunately, my school district, there's nothing in policies that prevents us from doing that. But I know there's a lot of districts across that, you know, they have something in school policies to where, you know, that might be prohibited. So it just kind of depends on your school policy. But for me, my school policy did not have anything on that. So we was able to insert our pronouns on our name tags outside our classroom or office door. And also I support the, I don't know, the I'm here name tags. I have that behind my name badge. So sometimes my name badge may flip over and you can see I'm here. So it has not been an issue yet for me yet, but you know, it's just another way that I support my LGBTQ allies and friends.
Thank you for that, Matthew. I think that's a really, the visibility piece, different ways of just showing subtle visibility. And so when you talk about just putting pronouns, something as simple as putting pronouns on a name tag or a badge that's just visible, to highlight that practice is just a simple first step that a lot of ESPs and other education staff can do to just show that visibility and support. We also know that sometimes there's successful implementation of things, but we also encounter many challenges. And so Saul, I think maybe you wanted to speak to some challenges that you've experienced as you've attempted to utilize pronouns, and how have you worked to overcome some of those challenges?
Sure, thank you. So I have to say, one of the challenges we've faced, at least in my local and maybe in surrounding locals, is actually from administration. We've received for example, if someone would like to put the pride flag in their classroom, if someone would like to put just one of the stickers that say brave space, save space, we've had some pushback from some administrators. They've said, if you do that, we're not being inclusive of all students, which just does not make any sense to me, right? So one of the things we've done is for example, in my local, we've started and created our very first LGBTQ plus committee to work on some of those issues. We've also tapped into our community to make sure that we have representation and make sure that they understand that a lot of the things that are happening in our schools is themes that we really need to start addressing right away. I've received a lot of questions from educators, especially in the elementary area, because we've done a lot of talk around middle school, high school, but we haven't done a lot of talk recently about elementary level, right? So there's a lot of questions about pronouns, there's a lot of questions about gender and so on. And that to me just shows that our educators, they have a real big interest in making sure that they're using the correct pronouns and names for our students, because as we all know, once you do start using someone's correct pronouns, it's statistically, it has shown that the suicide rates dramatically drop, right? And it's also a sign of respect. It's a sign of showing our students that we respect them enough to be able to acknowledge, their truth and make sure that they understand that they're welcome, they are in a safe space, and that we will try everything that we can to make sure that they feel safe. When our students, things may not be great at home, things may not be accepting at home, but they do know that they do have a support system within our schools, whether it's in pre-K through 12, whether it's in higher ed. We have to make sure that our students know that they should always feel valued and supported, and always just respected.
Thank you for that, Saul. And I think it's just worth kind of lifting up again that concept of how just a simple action of acknowledging and affirming pronouns can really have an impactful, it can be impactful on our students and really change the trajectory of how they see themselves in their school settings. And I did want to just circle back because we did get a couple questions, and I know Matthew was going to flash that other sign of visibility and just talk a little bit about the I'm Here badge that is available through the NEA LGBTQ plus caucus.
Yes, so I believe a link was posted in the chat, but basically it goes, you can use it as a name tag, and then on the back it has a QR code to where they can scan it, and that takes you to all of the resources and everything. So unfortunately, our state association went in and sponsored for our ESP Respect Conference that we have as a state. We also was able to provide every participant one of these. So it's really great, and it's a great way to show visibility and offer support for our students.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Matthew was more prepared. He had his badge ready. I also have one of those badges, and it is just a simple thing that sometimes students will just make note of and be like, oh, where'd you get that badge? And it's just simple visibility that can be helpful. Before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to make sure if any other panelists had experienced any challenges with the use of pronouns and their experiences that they just wanted to share any insights to that. All right. We can always circle back to some questions as well. So one of the other things, as we've previously discussed, pronouns are becoming the norm with students, and that students are using that. We're seeing that used a lot more in our classroom and school settings. How how do you work with parents and caregivers to understand and use pronouns? And what steps would you recommend that someone take to build capacity on using pronouns inside and outside of the classroom? So some of the questions that we've been getting from the panelists too have been kind of focused on like, how have you broached this topic with parents and caregivers, particularly of younger children, but of all ages? So we'll start with Karen, if you would like to just share what you've done when you've worked with that, with adults.
Mostly mine is like you said, Bill, working with adults at my job site. Mostly, I've had some issues in the past with a person that was trans, who's retired since then, but was really picked on, not addressed properly. I continue to try to stand up for this person and tell that, use the proper pronouns, she and her, and use the name that this person was going by. And yet I had a lot of difficulty and a lot of pushback. But now when I talk to people more about it, people are more open to this, and they're realizing things are different now than this was like 5 years, 7 years ago. But things have changed immensely in that time period.
Thanks, Karen. Saul, have you had experience trying to kind of work with parents and caregivers to understand the use of pronouns that you could talk to about a little bit?
Yes. So one of the things we've been working on at my local is we have our parent information center where all students would go first when they're being registered for school. So what we're trying to do in my local is to make sure that there is information already there for the parents once they register their for parents or caregivers once they register students. That way, people, parents or caregivers that already use different pronouns or have pronouns that they are using for their students, we make sure that they know that it can be a safe space to use it. And then what it does is it also educates those parents that may not have as much information on it. We've been trying to do that. And then also, like I said earlier, one of our main issues in my local is administrators. So we're also trying to create opportunities in the community to offer different trainings, different professional development within community centers and different organizations. And then also working with the school committee. Our school committee one of our school committee members, who's fantastic, just passed a resolution to bring it to the state delegation to make sure that trans students are treated respectfully and do get everything that they need and so on. So I think it just takes I know not every school committee is welcoming, right? I think we all know that. But I think working within our own capacities, whether it's, like I said, whether in the Parent Information Center or different organizations, and making sure that we're always present. As educators, we're frontline, and we just have to make sure that parents also understand that we understand and we're willing to do whatever it takes to make sure our students are respected and treated fairly.
So I just wanted to say, as a para who works in the library in my district, the district has committed to ensuring that there's books for children to read and resources. So we applied for a grant and we got it, and every elementary school has books on pronouns now. And Welcoming Schools, I know someone put it in the chat, has great resources, and NEA does partner with that organization. And also by sitting down with school councils and parent organizations, the PTO or whatever, it may sound crazy. You may be frustrated, but you always start off slow and then work your way up. And don't be put down, because it takes a lot to get things done everywhere, but it will work out in the long run.
Thank you, Bobby, for adding that. And one thing I will just kind of add, as I've listened and been monitoring the chat too, and we have a lot of experts in the audience as well, kind of throwing resources in the chat, which is great to see as well. But when the question comes up of like who uses pronouns, pronouns aren't just for LGBTQ plus people. We all use pronouns. It's part of how we identify ourselves and refer to ourselves in language. And so using pronouns like he, him, his, or she, her, hers, or they, them, their, those are pronouns that we commonly use in language to kind of refer to some people when we're not using their names or the actions that they're doing. So this is something that supports all students. All students get affirmed, and all adults get affirmed when we use pronouns correctly. So this impacts everybody. So one of the other questions before we go to some of the questions from the participants, one thing I would just like all the panelists to maybe share one resource that they've utilized that's been helpful to them as they've maybe engaged in this work. So I'll just kind of let the panelists kind of popcorn in, but if there's a resource that you have, we can add that resource to the chat, and we'll certainly include that in the follow-up. Some of the resources maybe have already been mentioned in the chat, but the panelists may just lift that up because they've had a personal experience using that particular resource to support this work. So I'll just kind of let any of the panelists jump in to share a resource that they would recommend or refer the participants to consider using.
So like I said, Welcoming Schools is a great resource. They have a lot of books that are appropriate for pronouns and stuff. And my district also, they came in and did a PD series with us. And so that's a really positive step.
Thanks, Bobby. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, so I always like to partner up with our local university here, and with they come to our schools and meet with our GSA clubs, the Gay Straight Alliance clubs. So it's really getting our community and our university involved, and sharing those resources together to where we're not alone. And like Bobby had said, you can't really take this straight on. You have to have the resources. You have to take it slow. Things are not going to just go your way all the time, but when you meet with others and gradually work your way up, things will start rolling then. So
thank you. Sal or Karen, any resources that you've used that you just want to lift up or promote before we start to transition to the Q&A section? No. All right. Well, we are ready to maybe transition to Q&A, and I know that some folks have already been submitting questions through the Q&A feature. So we will get to that point. And so we'll start off with one of the first questions that's kind of come up in the queue. And this kind of relates to the challenges. So, again, any of the panelists who have something to add to this, feel free to jump in. But if you could think of maybe some talking points that you maybe have used when you've interacted with students who think asking pronouns are a joke or something to be made fun of, if you've had that experience, like what has been a way that you've redirected that conversation in a way to shift the framework of that? So again, just talking points that you've used with students who think asking for pronouns is a joke or something to be made fun of.
So I'm at the elementary level, as I said before, and I always tie it back into respect. We want to be respectful of everyone, and that the greatest thing you can do to show respect is correctly identify them by their proper name and their proper pronouns that they like to be used. Sometimes you may mess up, but you admit it, and you go on. But yeah, I try to just let everyone know that everyone's accepted, and we need to be respectful of everyone. So
thanks for that. Any other strategies that they've used when maybe students or even adults have not taken the use of pronouns seriously?
I'll just say I actually saw a quote not too long ago, and I've been using it more frequently, which is it's something to the effect of, I can guarantee you transitioning is more difficult than actually learning someone's pronouns. So that's just something I always say to people, where it's not a laughing moment. It's nothing to joke about. This is life, and it's serious. And statistics have shown, the suicide rate and the fact that, the harm it actually causes to people. So I just, I don't deal good with it when someone uses it as a joking, because to me, it's nothing about it is a joking matter. And we always, like Matthew said, we always have to make sure that we're respecting everyone, especially our students and our staff.
Thank you for that. I'm just referring to see what other questions we have coming in from the panelists. Make sure that you can enter some questions in. And I know some of them are being answered too directly if there are specific questions for you. So we've had just one of the questions, people just, we have a question here that came in that during a staff meeting, they had a person who was uncomfortable with using pronouns and kind of laughed it off, which caused harm to members of the team. We addressed it the next day, but not in the moment. And so harm was kind of still felt from the moment, and it was clearly a missed opportunity. So they would love to hear any suggestions from the panelists on how they might address that in the moment without causing additional harm. So, in a moment in an adult space, like if somebody is not taking pronouns seriously, how might you have approached that type of situation in a staff setting?
Bill, I'll speak to that a little bit because I have addressed that. I usually try to pull the person aside, not to try to embarrass them in any way, and talk to them about what is going on and how the respect of using the proper pronoun, why it's there and why it helps out. And usually it works. Sometimes people are too ignorant to take to it.
Thank you for that, Karen. Kind of just another question. I know we've talked about this a little bit as a panel already, but I think it's just worth reiterating because people kind of come into this concept of pronouns from a range of experiences, where you might be in settings where pronouns have become commonplace, but you also may be in a setting where it really hasn't come to your school community. But if anybody could just give like a quick one-on-one lesson from their perspective on like, why do we use pronouns from your perspective? Why is this conversation important? And why has it had some increased visibility?
So I'll go ahead and go. Using pronouns, our students, when they're in the classroom or anywhere in the school, they need to be, they need to feel safe and supported. And, when you look at meeting the needs of the whole child, that, we have to ensure that our students are supported and are safe. And, using pronouns, and it allows them to be a part of the whole school community and accepting of them. So, if they're not being supported, then there's really no way that child can excel or succeed in school like any other child. They're going to struggle. So, when we're really dedicated to meeting the needs of every one of our students, we will work to ensure that we're successful. And one of them ways is using the correct pronouns.
Thank you, Matthew. We have a couple other good questions, so we'll kind of move along to that. So one of the questions here we have is, what advice would you give a student that has a teacher or an adult, an ESP in the building that's refusing to use their pronouns or preferred name instead of their dead name? And so have you had that experience before? And what advice would you give for a student to kind of interact with that, to deal with those types of mispronouncing or misnaming them? And like another way to phrase that too, as you're thinking about your responses, is just, you see a colleague who's refusing to use a student's pronouns or is joking about that with the other colleagues. What would your approach be to intervene in that type of situation?
I would just refer back to what Karen said. I would pull the person aside, not in front of a large group. And I know it's difficult. In my district, we had issues with veteran staff members because it's a generational thing when you think about it. And it takes a while to get, across a person. But in the long run, like what Matthew said, we're here for students. And if a student wants to have this series, the pronoun series, then we need to do it for students because we're here to support the student from pre-K all the ways, to higher ed.
Thank you for that, Bobby. Any other thoughts in terms of, have folks encountered that before with colleagues before who were resistant to this and had any success with kind of having those conversations?
Yeah, so in Kentucky, it's kind of there's a big divide of between conservatives and liberals and just all sorts of the spectrum. So there's a lot of resistance in my area in the western part, but I surround myself with those who share the same vision as me and really connect. And the Human Rights Campaign, a strong organization, and in my local town, it's not, the Human Rights Campaign's really not in there though, but the neighboring district where the university is there's a very strong presence of Human Rights Campaign that's offering activities and visibility. So I surround myself with those who share the same vision as me.
Can I just say, I also have one-on-one conversations with staff when things like that arise. And I usually say to them is, how does this affect you in any way? That's my first question, because you use pronouns with every other student. Why would you not use the correct pronouns for this specific student or these specific students? It's just a matter of just, again, showing respect. And as educators, that's what we're there to do, not just educate our students, but make sure that our students feel valued, they feel welcomed, and they feel safe. So as educators, it is our responsibility to make sure that we do respect our students in every way possible. And that would include using the correct pronouns and the correct name that they would, they use.
Thank you, Saul. And one of the things just to clarify, because I know as participants continue to listen to the panel and maybe jump in at different points, remember that when we're talking about pronouns and gender identity, like that applies to all of us. Every person has pronouns and gender identity. And I think, historically, as we think about our roles within education, sometimes we've kind of fallen into this trap of the binary and sorting. When we sort students, sometimes we sort them by boys and girls and things like that. So I was wondering, what you might do when colleagues have a hard time letting go of like binary gendered language, like referring to students as boys and girls, or doing things that like just divide students up into only two options. So I was wondering if any of the panelists have any good suggestions on more inclusive language or more inclusive ways to group students, as opposed to using the gender binary of just two options. And while the panelists kind of reflect on that a little bit, I know folks have also been asking for resources, which we'll continue to share. And I know they said at the beginning of the webinar, we'll continue to share resources. And NEA is also working on some resources specific to supporting pronouns and the importance of using pronouns. So those will also be made available as those resources get finalized.
And I just say really quickly, I think one of the things we've been trying to work on is typically when we refer to a group of students, we'll say, hey guys, so we're trying to actually get away from that and use other terms like, hey folks, or listen everyone, just different terms that don't necessarily have a gender specific to it. And then as far as, for example, in gym class, physical education, we worked on that a little bit as well, because you used to group up students, boys and girls, and now we just either do, number one, number two, and so forth. And that way it's actually more leveled and just easier for everyone.
Thanks, Saul. And I think one of the common points of confusion sometimes that come around with the use of pronouns is the confusing of sex, biological sex versus gender identity, and conflating the two as being the same and when they're kind of different. I don't know if any of the panelists wanted to just elaborate on the concept of gender identity a little bit, just to give a 101 definition from your experience. And while folks are thinking about that, I'm seeing a lot of other kind of inclusive references being thrown in the chat too by our awesome participants as well. And while the panelists think I know I'm not an ESP, but I'm actually a biology teacher by trade. So I do actually spend a lot of time focused on the biology of sex and the variance of sexual characteristics, and then the concept of gender identity. But as I interact with my students, we talk about like the anatomy and physiology of sex, but also gender. As we think of gender and gender roles and all those types of things, those are more of kind of a societal way of how we see ourselves in terms of how we fit into society. And so when we talk about things like gender norms and gender bias and those types of things, gender identity is really kind of how you see yourself within the greater context of our society, and is separate from kind of the biological component of your physical anatomy. So that's just one of the things that has been my takeaways as I think about that. Let's see if there's any more questions. I know we are getting close to time. That 1 hour does go pretty quickly. And if any of the panelists have anything to add to the dialogue, I'll mute myself and let you to jump in while I look at the next round of questions. So one of the questions that kind of has come up is what are some of the hurdles that you have had to overcome personally while educating everyone on this topic? So I know that all four of you as panelists have been members of the SOGI committee for NEA, but also within a variety of other spaces. You've been advocates around a variety of issues to support LGBTQ plus students and educators and education employees. So maybe just share a hurdle that you've had to overcome and how you've done that in your leadership journey.
So for me, I've been a para for 26 years, and I work with the veteran core of ESPs, and they weren't really on board with that at the beginning. And I reached out to my state Department of Education. Being Massachusetts, again, we're pretty progressive, and they had a great resource. And they came in and did a 10-hour course over the course of the school year. And with that, people felt really comfortable. And then we progressed by putting, the pronouns on people's doors, on registration materials, and people felt really comfortable. Again, it all depends on the area that you're in. conservative versus liberal. I know it's different for Matthew in Kentucky and stuff, but again, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And even if it's a little small thing, you have won. So.
Yeah, and for me, in Kentucky, our school district does not have LGBTQ curriculum. So it's up to us to kind of shift and be that lead to where we go to our school site-based decision-making councils and include that for our students, because currently there's no requirement that we teach the LGBTQ plus curriculum. So.
For me, in my district in Austin, about almost 10 years ago now, the district came up with an LGBTQ committee, and I was put on that committee, and we worked with the superintendent and some other high-level people, where we got a lot of curriculum put into the district, as well as the school district got involved with the Pride Parade, the Pride Fest. I was like really encouraged with everything that went on with that committee, and real encouraged with what continues to go on in the Austin Independent School District around Pride and everything to do with LGBTQ plus students.
And just to pick up what Karen said, another big thing is employee resource groups, and maybe you have a GLBTQ employee resource group, and so that you're involved with other educators in your local or in your district, and so that you don't feel that you're alone. Again, start off small, meet regularly, and then come together and try to put something out there so that you can expand.
Thanks for that, Bobby. And one thing I'll just add, and we'll have maybe one more closing question coming to the group, but for all of you participants here, this is a good first step. Some of you maybe have been engaged in these conversations for a long time, and for some of you, this may be the first step you've taken to learn about pronouns. And so it's a journey that's going to continue. And so as you can hear from the experiences of the panelists, you will continue to grow and learn. And so asking the questions that you're asking and engaging and attending webinars like this are steps for you to help to understand pronouns and why they're so important and how you can use them. And so I know that some of you maybe haven't even finished your school years, or some of you have been on summer vacation for a month, and we maybe don't want to think about the start of the school year again because we're trying to get into relaxation mode. But I just want to pose one last question to the panelists in terms of like maybe a strategy that you would consider on the first day of school, when you're first meeting your new group of students for the first time in whatever capacity that you interact with students. How do you introduce the concept of the pronoun in your setting? So we'll leave that as some advice to start a new school year fresh around pronouns.
So for me, working in the library, again, we have great resources with books, and starting off with the preschool kindergarten, there's basic books of, he, him, his, she, her. So start off by, doing that and then going on. A library is a great resource. So.
I usually model it when I introduce myself to the students. I'll say, my name is Mr. Ramos, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And sometimes there'll be a conversation about it, and sometimes there won't be. And then sometimes there's side conversations about it, follow up on it. But I like to model it so that way they know that they can feel comfortable also letting us know what their correct pronouns are.
Thank you, Saul.
Yeah, so I'll refer back to the name badge that's outside of my office door. If you don't have a classroom, you can still practice, and just like on your school bus, you can put your name above the driver's seat, and then your pronouns under it. So it's everyone uses pronouns, and so it's nothing that's really just extremely going to be detailed out, but everyone uses it, and it's just a great way to show support. And like for me, it was a start of a movement, and then everyone started kind of putting their pronouns under it. And if you work at elementary school, you can go to the English teacher and say, hey, look, when kids need to find pronouns, have them come to my office door and they can find pronouns outside of my door. So, tie it into content as well. So.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, it's been an honor to moderate this panel. And I wish we had more time to continue the discussion. I know some folks maybe had questions that weren't answered. I'm going to turn it back over to Anthony to kind of wrap us up and bring some closure, and then just share out how you'll be able to access some wonderful resources moving forward as we continue this work.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to our panelists. Before we close out, I would like to close out with just talking about positive experiences of social gender affirmation are critical to the health and well-being of our transgender and gender diverse people. We have to remember that social interactions where a person is addressed by their correct name, such as Anthony, not Tony, and pronouns he, him, his, consistent with their gender identity, are widely recognized as a basic yet critical aspect of gender affirmation. Addressing someone by their wrong name or misgendering them through the use of incorrect pronouns can feel disrespectful, harmful, and even unsafe to the person being misgendered. Misgendering results in marginalization and communicates that a person's identity is not being seen or respected. So yes, let's all practice using the pronouns a transgender or a non-binary person requests, as well as all of the LGBTQ population, and as people have been saying, the heterosexual straight population, because yes, we all have our pronouns, we all have our name. It's a show of respect, it's a sign of respect, and it's a show of inclusivity. So with that, many individuals have asked for resources. We do have some resources that we popped into the chat, as well as we will be following up with you all with resources specifically for this webinar, as well as to address your specific questions. Resources on our NEA LGBTQ resources page. You can find links to our partner organizations that have information around pronouns, as well as our NEA@justice.org. You can go to that page and sign up. And you can sign up for and research and sign up for particular topics that you want to receive information on, as well as stay connected with us at NEA Today, as well as NEA Respect, whether it's through Instagram or Facebook as well. My direct contact information is here on the slide. If there are questions that we did not address, or if you have more specifics, I know there were questions posed that could challenge policies and practices that are implemented in your state or your local or school district level. We did not want to comment on anything that could result into legal challenges. So if there are questions or comments or concerns about what's happening in your district or in your state, you can feel free to email me and we can point you in the right direction. But I always recommend, if you are a part or a member of the association, please contact your local and state affiliates, as well as your general counsel, who will have the most up-to-date information about what's happening in your states around LGBTQ policies, as well as the implementation of pronouns. And thank you all for joining tonight's webinar. I specifically want to say a huge thank you to our ESP, who, as Saul said, are the first ears and eyes and the last ears and eyes that our students see and hear, as well as what we see and hear in our students. They are our frontline workers in our education system, no matter where you are. So it's important that we all in the educational community, within the four walls of our schoolhouse, our community, at our state and our national level, listen to our ESP as they have vital information that really impacts our policy and practice. So thank you all for joining. And I will kick it back over to Jessica Brinkley that has a few more bits of information to share with you before we log off for the evening. Thank you all.
To request a general session specific certificate of completion as a participant of a recorded session, please send your request by email to espqweb@nea.org. All requests must include the session title and the on-screen certificate of completion code. Session certificates will not be provided if your viewer code is not included in the email request. Note, due to limitations in our ability to track attendance for recorded sessions, personalized certificates can only be provided for participants of live webinars whose attendance can be verified. The certificate received for viewing recorded sessions will be session specific, but will not include personalized names. On behalf of the Center for Professional Excellence in Student Learning's NEA ESP Quality Department, along with our partnering colleagues in the Human and Civil Rights Department, I would like to once again thank our panelists, our moderators and facilitators and presenters for tonight's webinar presentation, and thank you all for your participation. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and good night from the NEA ESP Quality Department.